It's Thursday afternoon, 4 p.m. in Central Europe. It's Space Café Scotland time. Our Space Café Scotland by Angela Mathis will begin soon. And we would like to thank ESA Space Solution and Astra Agency for their great support for our event series. As always, we really appreciate your participation and ongoing feedback. We constantly learn and improve based on the feedback you give us. My name is Chiara. I'm the event coordinator here at SpaceWatch.Global. Now, SpaceWatch.Global is a Europe-based online platform for information in and about space and new space activities in a geopolitical context. And I would like to thank all our private and corporate supporters that have shown their commitment to keeping our independent journalism alive. We really appreciate this. And with Angela Mathis, CEO of Think Tank Maths, we have found a great friend and a wonderful host for our outreach in Scotland. I know many of you are already familiar with our website, our bi-weekly and daily newsletters, and our Space Cafe podcasts. The last episode featured Geraldine Naya about the commercialization of ESA, the Russian abstinence, and why ESA might just be waiting for your job application, so definitely worth a listen. And for all our fans of audio content, we also have new episodes in our Space Cafe radio, so go check it out. We also keep our fan shop online open for you to support us actively and become a space watcher. And if you've missed any of our previous web talks, we have an archive on our webpage in the events section and on our YouTube channel. And we will host our Space Cafe Scotland live regularly. Now with that, my job is done, and I'd like to hand you over to your host today. Angela, over to you.
She's always a hard act to follow, is our Chiara. She's so bright and bubbly, even when she's got a summer flu cold. Anyway, welcome everyone. Angela Mathis based in Edinburgh, speaking to our guest today, Frank Strang, the brave man from Shetland, who either brave or crazy, right, Frank? Who decided to set up the SaxaVord, the Shetland Space Centre, and the SaxaVord Spaceport. So I want to bring Frank into the meeting. I think if you're all here, you all know what you've come for. I don't see the screen moving, so I don't see Frank appearing. Can we?
I'm here.
Yeah, he's here. Here's Frank. Hi, Frank. Hi, welcome. So sun is shining on Shetland today, but there's you're not seeing much of it because it's a busy time up there, right?
Oh, it's very busy, brave and crazy. And going back to what you were saying about Cara, you need enthusiasm's contagious, is what my old warrant officer in the Air Force told me, and I always look for that in the team. So we need a lot of enthusiasm to keep going up here. But yeah. Sun shining, the diggers are on the site. We've got contractors on site. I've got the Civil Aviation Authority, the regulator here at the moment, debriefing us on our license. And lambs are being born in the fields around the spaceport as well. So it's a bit busy.
Well, we'll get to that too, because I think everyone wants to know how. That's probably towards the end. We'll talk about how do you bring space, how do you bring UNST, and marry those two, but we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that sort of further down the line. So introduce yourself, Frank. I mean, I know you quite well, so I don't want to, there's things you might want to highlight. You are an ex-RAF. You have done, wild things, jumped out of windows and spoofed all your mates in the RAF. But there's much more to you. You're an entrepreneur. You've had several businesses, and so successful businesses, and here you are. Where did you get the idea? Where did you get the idea? What morning did you get up? What did you have that breakfast or the night before that told you wanted to start a spaceport?
Well, I get asked that question a lot, actually, Angela, and I have known you, and you've been a champion for what we've been doing up here ever since we first met and ever since you came up. My background, I'm probably the least technical able in my team. And some of my team will testify to that. I trained as a physical education teacher a long time ago, back in 1976, at the Scottish School of Physical Education in Glasgow, Jordan Hill College, which you'll know, which was quite a prestigious physical education college. I then joined the Air Force in 1984 as a physical education officer, but my job was much more varied than that. I broke my back parachuting and had to come out on a medical discharge and sort of fell into business. And I've, it's very kind of you, but I've had quite a lot of success, but also failure in business, and everyone has failures and successes. But I've been involved in defence, aviation, security, economic regeneration, more or less since I left the Air Force, some 20 odd years ago, 25 years ago. And I would say that this project here, up in Ernst, is probably the culmination of all the various skill sets that I've developed, if I've developed any, over the years. It's an economic regeneration project. It's an aerospace project. We're working with the Ministry of Defence. We're working with commercial entities. We're working in security. And whilst I may not be a master of all those skills, I know enough. And life's a journey, and it takes you on a certain route. And where we are today is probably where I'm going to end up.
Well, I suppose that's the commitment that it takes, Frank. I mean, perseverance, staying power, I think is the word that comes to when I talk about SaxaVord. And I think anybody who's setting up a spaceport, I mean, Scotland has, this. In the last 4 years, it's become an incredible space is on the agenda. There's a Scottish strategy for space.
Yep.
Tell us about. First of all, tell us about the team that you've got around you, because I think that's fair, right? So tell us.
The team's the most important thing. It's not about me, and I tell everyone, and I've just told the regulator that this is not about me as a reasonably high-profile businessman. It's about my team. And over the last 5 years since we first met, the team's grown from 4, to we've now got 40 full-time employees on the Spaceport payroll. And without the team's perseverance, it's been hand-to-hand combat at times to get us to where we are. But the team has delivered, and the team of ownership. And my team's made up. My number 2, who you know well, is another former Air Force fast jet pilot. I've got more. I've almost got a squadron of pilots, actually. I've got, but Scott Hammond is my right arm and is a former qualified weapons instructor. Went to Top Gun school. He hasn't got an ego as a pilot, and so my team's made up of a lot of former military, but also some of my team have a background in oil and gas, another industry you know well, and there's a lot of synergies between oil and gas. There's an upstream and a downstream. And the Shetland economy is based on its geography, which also includes oil and gas. Mm-hmm. And then I've got some of the guys that have been with me, through the hospitality and security. So it's a real mixed bag. I will say that my old warrant officer, who was my warrant officer when I was a young officer, aged 23, is still with me, and he's now 78. So I must be doing something right. But these things, you talked about stickability, whether it's space or any business, the key is to be able to stick at it and see it through. There are times during this journey where we've all been very, very tired because we felt we've been tilting at windmills for a long, long time. And then suddenly the sun comes out from behind the clouds and you're there, and that gives you the energy to move on. And I'm on my soapbox now, but people ask me, what does give you the energy? Well, what gives me the energy is when I get a card from a little girl aged 8 from a school 2 islands down that I've never met, and she's drawn a picture of a rocket, and she's asked me if there's any jobs going at the spaceport, and then I get another kid who's drawn a model, little Gracie, aged 9, who I didn't know. I knew her father, came up to me in the summer with a drawing of a new Mars rover that she'd done at school. And she said to me, what should I do with this? And I said, well, send it to NASA. So she sent it to NASA, and NASA came back with a letter saying, dear Gracie, we're always looking for new engineers. Here's some stickers, here's a baseball cap. If you're ever looking for a job, get in touch with us. And that's what makes it worthwhile for me.
Indeed, fantastic. I mean, if for those, looking at Unst, I mean, Unst was a thriving fishing port. I mean, at the turn of the 20th century, sort of the early 1900s, there were scores of fishing, and there was herring and things coming in, and now there's nothing, right? So you talked about there's nothing in the fishing area. I mean, there were boats. It was a very busy port, right? And
more than that. So Unst is the most northerly island in the Shetland Islands, as you know. I always say this, and everyone laughs, but we have the Flagler Lighthouse right on the end there, and the Flagler is the Stevenson Lighthouse. So Robert Louis Stevenson, the famous author, his uncle, designed and built it, like many lighthouses around the coast of Scotland. And for those of you that know the Stevenson novels, Robert Louis Stevenson wrote Treasure Island. And he used to come to Unst on his holidays. And the apocryphal story is that the outline of Treasure Island is actually the outline of Unst. Oh, wow. So there you go. But Unst used to have a population of 2,000. It's now got 600. It was a thriving fishing port with a herring fleet. But the Air Force came here during World War II, and then during the Cold War, the site that I'm talking to you from just now, there was about 300 personnel with their families. There were 5 shops. There was 5 football teams. There was a lot going on. The airfield on Unst, which we own, used to be the busiest heliport in Europe. 350,000 passengers a year came through Unst. Now, when I bought Prestwick Airport in 2000, we had less than 300,000 passengers going through Prestwick. They were all transiting to the oil rigs, but then it shut down. So what happened was the island went from being a busy island to zero, as you quite rightly said. And suddenly the school, which had 300 pupils, has 40. So the teachers' jobs are on the line. The medical centre, had 3 doctors as one. So things changed very, very quickly. What space is going to do for Unst and for Shetland, as well as for Scotland, we'll talk about Scotland in a minute, is bring back those good times, and it's all based on geography and infrastructure.
Yeah, we actually at Think Tank Maths, we have an employee on Shetland. You probably didn't know that as well. We've got a Shetlander who's working up there from the moment remotely. We've got up there. We have.
Oh my goodness!
Yes, indeed.
I'm going to hold something up here. I don't know if you can see it. It's a book it's called The Many-Coloured Land, and it's a science fiction novel by an author called Julian May, who was a lady from Oregon. And I don't read science fiction, believe it or not, but the head of Shetland Arts passed it on to me, and it was written in the early 80s. And in it describes the island of Unst on Shetland as the starport and the entry to the galaxy.
Wow.
Can you believe that?
Prophecy.
And more importantly, you can get a tube from Unst to Paris.
Back to the future. Well, this is prophesying. So Frank, what you've talked about the team, you've talked about some of the team, getting a plan together and getting investors. How do you? You've got a white sheet of paper. In fact, you don't even have the sheet of paper. I mean, you just don't even, it's not a sheet of paper you're writing this on. How did you put a business plan together? How did you go about the journey? Can you share with people what was the,
Yeah. Okay. So we're actually
highlights.
So we call it a Netflix story, and we've actually got a TV company at the moment who are pitching it to Netflix, and we're writing the book. You got to remember that it's not false modesty. I'm the least technically able in my team. And although we knew a lot about aerospace and fast jets and missile technology, we were not experts in space. There are many more people watching this, who know much more than I do. But you need to start with a belief. And we got approached. The UK Space Agency held a competition about 5 years ago. It was designed to stimulate interest in launch from Scotland, and it's the UK Pathfinder programme. and a questionnaire went out around the north of Scotland, whereby remote locales were asked to fill in, answer questions about their infrastructure, hotel rooms, blah, 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 blah. And I asked what it was about, and I was told it was about government looking to find somewhere to launch rockets from. And I thought, oh, that's quite cool. We filled in the questionnaire, and we worked out that we scored quite highly. So we eventually, we found out it was a competition. We were too late and we missed it. But we went to visit the UK Space Agency in London, who said that they felt Shetland would be the right locale for a spaceport. And an independent report had been written for government. It was authored by the Space Agency, Leicester University, various enterprise companies. I think Deimos were involved. And its mandate was to find the optimal site for small sat launch from the UK. And we were not aware of it. But when we were shown it, the number one site was SaxaVord on Unst, by a factor of 30%. And it's all down to geography, as everyone will know. And that really put the petrol in our tank to say maybe there's something in it. So we then, as you know, decided to host a space symposium to invite people from the industry to come to Shetland to see if what my gut told me was right. And along came you and a few others, followed by Ariane. And everyone said, when they came to the Lamenais site, this is the most perfect location in the UK. You need to carry on. And because we had that belief, we started to knock on some doors just to see if there would be interest. And actually, our friends at Ariane, I still remember to this day getting a call from Ariane saying, can we come and talk to you because we believe your site will be of interest. Olivier called with Johan and said, we're coming to Shetland. And I said, I'll meet you at the airport. And they came and spent 3 days, and they said, we would like to support you. So what we did is that the small team I had then worked closely with Ariane, and we picked their brains, and they helped us design a spaceport for what we thought the marketplace was looking for. We then started, as soon as it was bizarre, as soon as the world heard that we were open, the emails started to come in, and the phone went. And so Scott and I started to walk the streets of Europe and America, just talking to the new space companies that are out there. And they all said, look, we're really interested in your location. If you get a license, if you build a spaceport, we would like to talk seriously to you. So using that intel, as they say, we started to build up the bones of a business plan looking at launch. And with the help of Ariane and our friends over there in Europe, we started to gain an understanding of the pricing. For those of you who are entrepreneurs, I hate that word, or getting into business, always go with your first instinct. And our business plan is not too far away today, 6 years down the line from where it was 6 years ago, to be honest. Mm-hmm. It was a mix of government and commercial, US and European business. So we used the experiences that we've had in aerospace and aviation, and started to put the numbers together. Initially, we used my money, but we started to run out. So what you do is you go out and you go and pitch to the marketplace. You end up going down rabbit holes. You meet all sorts of crazy people. And
crazier than you.
Oh, yeah. But because we didn't have the government Pathfinder program at that time, nobody believed us.
Right.
And so for 2 years we struggled. But we kept going. We were running on fumes at one point. We were fighting the politics. We were fighting the fact that we had no money, we had no government support. But bit by bit, going back to that stickability, we stuck at it. And an ultra high net investor took interest in us, put a little bit of money in, and that puts more petrol in your tank belief-wise, because it's all about passion. And because he'd put some money in, some others put some money in, and where we are today, we're sat with many millions in the bank. We've got the vertical launch program, the Pathfinder program. What happened was Lockheed had settled upon another prospective site in Scotland and Sutherland, where I come from, but decided that they couldn't make it work there, and they approached us and said, we'd like to move. And so with them, their chosen launch provider, they eventually moved to us, which this is all in the public domain. Yes. And then suddenly we became, the site of the Pathfinder program. And again, because it's in the papers, because it's on the internet, people started to believe, and things started to happen. We had to pull together a planning application, deep joy, and master planning, a spaceport, it's pretty new for the UK, and there's not too many on Shetland, and it's a case of, in the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, but we got it away. It took longer than expected, but we got our full planning approval, and then suddenly we got more best friends. So, it's been a journey with lots of ups and downs, but where we are today, is that we're in a very healthy position. We've got we're in dialogue with 7 clients about launching from us. And we're revenue generating from our ground station. And I just had the architects here yesterday with regards to, we're looking to build an iconic hotel, a bit like the Eden Project, so people who come and stay and want to look at the spaceport can also go bird watching and look at the orcas and look at the otters and live in a 21st century accommodation. So there's an awful lot going on, but it's been a journey, and these things evolve. They evolve all the time. But yeah, I'm only 12 years old really, but I look about 100.
ever young Frank. So it's not just a launch site, and it's also so what you're saying, from this, it's private. I mean, you've had a lot of, you've had support. You've had support from, because you have to, and but I think
there's not one penny. Sorry for interrupting. There's not one penny of public money in our project. It's all private, all private. Now that gives you the agility to move quickly and make the decisions. I have to report now to shareholders who are very visionary, but because we don't have government funding, sometimes people say, well, you still can't be real. But with government funding also comes hurdles and hoops to jump and hoops to go through. So it's both a double-edged sword. But I think because we're private, we had one very well-known launch company talk to us 2 weeks ago who want to come to us. And I said, why have you come to us? And they said, because you're privately held and you've got skin in the game, and we know that you'll work hard to make it work for us. Really? So that's the other side of it.
Yeah, fantastic, Frank. Is so this journey of because you mentioned it on passing, and nobody had launched anything from the UK, right? I mean, not for a long time, and not really seriously. So there isn't even a rule book, right? So you were having to. I know you did some work with other other places around the Shetlands, sort of northern, to try to learn. So on that learning journey, can you you've talked to the other nations that might be interested in this unsynchronous arena? Well, you've got to. You can't do this on your own, especially, this is new. It's not new for America or for India or for, or for New Zealand, but it's new for here. And I'm a great believer, if you can work collegiately, you should do it, especially if you're in a hurry. So what we did is, in fact, the team are just back from Kodiak. 3 of my team went to Kodiak in Alaska. We've been talking to these guys for quite a while about tapping into their expertise and sharing equipment, etc., etc. We have been working with the Kennedy Space Centre, with ACOM, who run Kennedy,
We goodness, where else? Yeah, so with Germany as well. You know,
you have an office in Germany, don't you? You have an office in Munich.
Oh yeah, we have an office in Munich. We're about to open an office in Washington. We were looking at Paris, but because Robin, who you know, is half French, half German, in fact, our office is next to Airbus's headquarters in Munich. Robin is driving our European initiative. And I've always, you know me, I've always maintained that this is not a UK spaceport. You know, our spaceport is an international spaceport, and we're supporting both Europe and the US, but predominantly Europe. And one of the things I love about this industry, I meet 12-year-olds with PhDs and ponytails from companies who are so full of enthusiasm. But I can tell you, I can think of 3 companies, and they're all European actually, but no, one American. We had 12 of them downstairs in our little restaurant and bar, and there was 2 Germans, a French lady, a Turkish lady, a Russian and a Ukrainian, a Canadian, and a couple of Brits. It's an international business, you know, and I love it. You know, I was brought up in the Royal, you know, and cut my teeth in the Royal Air Force and worked with the MOD and the DOD. You know, and I'm very red, white, and blue, but I look at this business, it's an international business, and it's full of young people with lots of ideas who know no fear and no boundaries. And to sit there and have an Italian and a German and a Russian young man or woman chatting to me in English, I'm ashamed to say I'm not that great with languages, and we're talking, it just makes it worthwhile, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. We have a question from Catherine Courtney. Would someone like to ask it? Torsten, could you? Because
Sure. Catherine, thanks for the question. So she writes, I love the origin story, classic startup tale. I like to ask, what is Scotland's USPs that will allow it attract launch business away from other locations?
It's our northern latitude, basically, but we won't attract at all. So from Shetland, if we launch into some synchronous orbit, we don't have to do a dogleg over the Faroes. We can get straight to where we need to get to. But it's about pricing and access. Our nearest competitor really is Norway and Andoya, and then you've got obviously S-Range in Sweden. But you know, there's 2 pads there, and I think there's 1. There's enough business for all of us. The USP is access to a supply chain, our northern latitude. If you look at Kodiak, if you were to launch from Kodiak, the accommodation is 1 hour and 15 minutes drive away. I'm talking to you 5 minutes from the launch site, and that's where our accommodation is. So there's a lot of infrastructure very close to the launch site. We have a supply chain that is very, very mature, supporting oil and gas. So if you forget your screwdriver or you need more helium, you know, all we've got to do is go down the road to the oil terminal and we can pick up more supplies. You know, we have a very mature supply chain. So there are many factors, but I think eventually, I think if you drill it right down, it'll come down to access and cost.
Yeah. So you know, it is that sun-synchronous location, isn't it? It's the sun-synchronous location. Yeah. Brilliant. But also, I mean, you mentioned it's using the port, the deep port, the ability to, you know, there's already a.
Okay, so yeah, on that, Angela. So just again, 5 minutes behind me is the little port of Baltasound. So today so the overall cost of this build will be about 100 million. To get to initial operating capability, we're spending 23 million, and that most of that's into roads and infrastructure and laying concrete. And we have a small port, as you mentioned, you know, not far from here, and we've just taken in 14 barges of aggregate from Norway, which is going to go down and help lay the foundations of our roads. We've got a small airstrip that we're literally looking to bring back online now. It's all that infrastructure, but we because of the oil and gas, we have access to specialist skill sets and commodities that our other locations might struggle with, to do with the liquid oxygen, etc., etc. So Shetland's a very unique place. Going back to Scotland, and I think the question was more about Scotland, is the Scottish government, has made it very clear that space, they want to see space become an engine room for the new economy. I say that space bookends the United Kingdom from Shetland all the way to Cornwall, yes. But the spine goes all the way down through the Central Belt, Inverness, Central Belt of Scotland. More CubeSats, 60% of the world's CubeSats are designed and built in the Central Belt of Scotland and Glasgow. And the universities of Edinburgh, Strathclyde, Glasgow, are putting a lot, as are putting a lot of effort into the new space economy. And it's becoming quite exciting. I don't think the members of Parliament fully appreciate the benefits that the space economy can bring, all the spin-off businesses. But yeah, so Scotland, where we are, I see we're the tip of the spear because we're right at the far north, but there's a whole industry behind us. And there will be other spaceports. They won't all survive. But what I perhaps didn't say is our spaceport, we've got 3 pads. We've got planning permission for 3 pads. We've got room for 2 more. So we can service 3, 4, 5 clients as opposed to 1.
So there's a question here, and sorry, it's Mike Harwood, I think, is that, or there's someone else is asking. He's saying, are you strictly going to be what we call a vertical launch?
Yes.
Or is there scope for horizontal launch offered by other locations in the UK? Okay,
so the horizontal launch in the UK is well publicised as the spaceport in Cornwall at Newquay Airport, and they're working with Virgin, and we partner with Cornwall, and that's one. Prestwick, which I know very well, in just outside Glasgow, is going to be a horizontal spaceport as well. We are purely vertical. Our runway is only 640 meters, so it's not quite long enough for a 747, but we're purely vertical launch, small sat launch.
Right. So you want to extend. So this gentleman, so it's Mike Howard. He's asking, you want use Sundberg, the airport there on Shetland to start.
As far as there's nowhere on Shetland where you get a long enough runway, and again, there's not enough business. I mean, Cornwall is very well advanced, and I think you're looking at a Virgin orbit launch in certainly late summer. That's their aspiration, maybe towards the end of the year. And I know the guys in Prestwick are working very hard to get there. And if I was to bet, you'll get horizontal launch out of both.
Yeah.
I hope so, because business begats business, and the more business that you've got going on in Scotland and the UK, it becomes a honeypot. And we can't, and we'll service different clients.
Yeah. So there's another question from the same gentleman. He's
okay.
I'm curious. Mike Harwood, you might know Mike. He's asking about, where energy is and power. So the energy and power for the requirements in a world of net zero. So we're going to get onto the topic of sustainability and net zero. And I know you've got plans up there. Maybe you'd want to share with us, the whole idea of making this. You've already had to deal with. Maybe you could go back to that, folk will say, it was a very quiet place up there and there was nothing going on. And some people might rejoice in the fact you're bringing a spaceport here or a space centre. But because it is a centre, actually, it's not just a launch site, right? So it's a whole raft of things. Can you tell us,
no,
do you take the community with you? How do you get the community, the population, and the folk that are bird watchers and people that are concerned in this question here about energy and making sure it's net zero? Frank,
it's a very good question, and we're so, my goodness, there's lots to answer in there. Well, first of all, I get angry, when people think, when the bird watchers have a go at us, or the environmentalists. My father was a very well-known author and environmentalist, and he was running wildlife tours in the 70s. I love the outdoors, and and appreciate the otters and the orcas and the birds just as much as anyone else. And I'll come back to that in a minute. But we've had to, the only way to bring people with you is to do what you say you're going to do, and when they built the Sullomvo oil terminal back in the 70s, the Shetlanders very cleverly, Shetland looks after itself, and the environment is very important to Shetland, but industry needs to work collaboratively with the environment. So they set up an organization called SOTIAG, the Sullom Oil Terminal Environmental Action Group, and it was there to monitor the terminal. And so it was made up of birdwatching groups, environmentalists, the council, etc. And SOTIAG for the last 40 years has very successfully kept an eye on Sullomvo and with regards to potential oil spill, how do you deal with the migrating birds, etc., etc. So I said from day one I wanted to replicate that we would set up our own version of SOTIAG to oversee our action, what we were doing. I also said that one of the things, talking to Professor Brian Cox, who said the best way to protect the Earth is to look down on it from space, is that I wanted to create an environmental and ecological support operations centre here to see how we can use satellite technology to help save the planet. And that's part of our business plan going forward. So we already have, of our own volition, we created a post about Yvette, who she may be listening, I hope she is, because she was a big part of our journey. Brought in a young lady called Sorcha Levy as our sustainability officer, a graduate from Oxford. Sustainability is very important, and what we've done, set our stall out from day one, is I want to be as green and environmentally friendly as we possibly can be. Power is a major issue. And as such, I think I've told you this, but the first licensed hydrogen-powered car in the UK was developed on UNST by the Pure Energy Centre. These guys are now working full-time for us, and Ross is our chief engineer. We are looking at an off-grid solution. The first tidal energy generator turbine, the first tidal turbine that's generating electricity is in Blue Sound between Unst and Yale, and that's a company called Nova Energy. And our team are looking and are going to work with Nova to see if we can use some of that tidal to support the spaceport. We'll end up with a mix of solar, tidal, wind, but an off-grid solution. And I'm very keen to create this exemplar. And people look at these rockets in Cape Kennedy, we look at Falcon 9, and they see all this, what they think is smoke coming out the bottom of the rocket, but we know it's steam, right? But there's this perception that space is bad news. It's not. We're working with Skyrora, who are looking at an eco-friendly fuel, high impulse, basically it's paraffin. So it's something, we haven't got all the answers, and we've had a lot of other things on our plate, but I can tell you, that the sustainability credentials of the spaceport are hugely important to our team. We're working today, Sorcha goes out 3 times a day on our bird count. We're putting, we're building a hide at the bottom of the spaceport so people can look at the orcas as they're coming around, and the orcas will be looking at the rockets, and we'll be looking at the orcas. So there's an awful lot of stuff going on. We've got one of the UK's leading ecologists, and Pete Cosgrove, advising us. I could go on and on and on. Space situational awareness is something that you're very close to. And how do you deal with space debris? Well, if we can, create a facility here that allows us to help with that problem, then we'll do it.
Yeah, and that brings to me, everybody's got an opinion. I think, folk are, because there are some comments that are saying, energy, geothermal is important, etc. But, the seas generate so much energy. There is, there's solar and there is wind power. and it's a mix. I'm also on the Scottish Energy Forum, and we have this debate all the time, you know, but it's an open debate.
It's about balance.
We've got to develop,
Everything's about balance, you know, and so we've got a ground station today on the island that is talking to 2 satellites that were launched by SpaceX about 2 months ago. Yeah. But that ground station is, and this is Shetland we're talking about, that ground station has got a solar pack. It's been powered by solar. So it can be done, you know, but everything's about, but we can't get rid of fossil fuels. You know, it's going to take time. And the Shetland economy has done very well out of the North Sea, but it's all about balance. And what I like to do is surround myself with people that are very, very much smarter than me. And with Ross and the Pure team, they've got the credentials, and their mandate is to find a way that, you know, that we can be self-sufficient, that we can work off grid, and what we'll be doing the same in the sustainability. Our principal shareholder, Anders Poulsen, you know, is one of the world's foremost rewilders. You know, he's one of the richest men in the world. He is passionate about rewilding and about ecology, and you know, we are working with his team to see what we can do on the ground. So, you know, I keep saying we got to try and show that space can be a force for good.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And it's, you know, there's obviously issues. I've got probably a last question that I'll come on to sort of after that. But you know, the sustainability you mentioned, you know, Scotland is taking this. I've done some talks with folks. We've had Moribba Jah advising us. We're now working with Privateer Space and Alex Fielding and Steve Wozniak, who are very much about, they want to deal with the space domain awareness, but want to do this and make sure that it's sustainable. There's a new paper that's just been published last week on, actually, by Astronomy Nature, or Nature Astronomy, and it is talking, it's the phrase of space environmentalism. You know, there's a blueprint there. There's the things to watch for, and I'm sure that's I know that that's something that your team, they participate in the Scottish Sustainable, because we have part of Space Scotland, the Sustainable Scotland a steering group and working group, and I know that you're very, very active, and your team are very proactive in that group.
Yeah, and Yvette, was leading the charge and all of that. You know, I come back to, as I say, I mean, just before Christmas, I attended an event where we're looking to help some young people, and Brian Cox, who I'd never met before, was a trustee. And, you know, I mean, what do you do when you're talking to, well, you know, he's young, he's good looking, he's a superstar scientist, and he's got suntan, and he's been a rock star. What do you, and what a nice man, you know, and I wasn't sure where he sat in this whole debate, you know, and he had a very pragmatic view, but, you know, his view is that, you know, the answer to a lot of our problems is up there, you know, looking down. But I tell everyone that life is about balance, you know, and it's all about balance. And sometimes there's not one single key that unlocks the problem, but you've got to throw a lot at the wall before you get there.
You do. And on that, you know, I mean, space, it's people look at it with hope and sometimes with caution. I mean, we know, you know, we haven't touched on, you know, you've said military, but, you know, also NATO, and trying to pull together the sort of, you know, the partners in NATO to do this, because it is a huge opportunity, as you said, for us to observe the Earth, right? I mean, to observe the Earth from, and help us manage resources on Earth. And at the same time, where do you see in your strategy, because you must be aware of and your board and your investors, you know, you see the threats to the industry, you see the potential to make space the shiny, you know, to give humanity a future that's great, but at the same time, it does have to be managed. How do you sit yourself within all of that? The sustainability piece aside, I suppose, but
if you're talking about, well, first of all, you know, as an ex-military officer, and we are working closely with various defence agencies, you know, the sad fact is that the next wars are going to be fought in space. You know, we've seen it. You know, I think and there's no getting away from that. How you manage that and how you control it, you know, international treaties can sometimes work. You know, that will take a life of its own, but it's inevitable. It's happening. But turn it around, and I think it was a week into the dreadful events in the Ukraine, Elon Musk got Starlink into the Ukraine. You know, up, bang, suddenly the comms in a certain part of the Ukraine were much, much better. That's because of space, you know. So, you know, well, life is never straightforward. You know, was it evil flourishes, you know, when good men do nothing. You know, I haven't got the answers. What I see, and I tend to look at the positives rather than the negatives. What I see is an industry, and up here in Unst, where people in their 90s and people in their age 5 are all excited, and I can see the benefits. And where there's excitement and enthusiasm, there's hope. And I see all the different benefits there, and I can smell the opportunity. And I think it's the UAE. If you look at the UAE and their space strategy, where they're using science and space as the engine room for their new economy and all the spin-offs, you know, that's, you know, that's where I see space going. I mean, I don't know if Yvette's on, but you know, Yvette was one of our team, as you know, and a dear friend. For me, this is. There's a school, as part of our education program, there's a school outside Lerwick called Sandwick. And the school in Sandwick entered a competition with a well-known local building company, and it was all about astronomy. And long story short, they won it, and they got money to build a small observatory in the school grounds. The teachers got together. So this school looks after kids from age 5 to 16. And the teachers got together and decided to base the future curriculum on science and space. So PE, space, music, science, you know, all around there. And everyone, you know, and now I understand there's a graduate from that school who wants to study applied physics at St Andrews. Isn't that great? You know, so let's take the positive sides, you know, of what we're doing. If we look at the glass half empty, you know, we'll never get out of our beds. There's no doubts that the world's militaries, you know, are going to fight wars in space. There's no doubts that satellite, you know, that's going to happen. I don't want to go there. I just want to look at the future.
Yeah. No, I hear what you're saying, and you know, we have to be resilient in other ways.
Yeah.
And so, Torsten, there are some other. So, look, that's because that is an important side of it, and I think you're right. You know, it's with the positivity and looking for solutions rather than coming with more negative. And you know, you're saying that in fact, you even talk about physical education. You know, I mean, the whole science of the human body and what we learn about humans, NASA has a huge
absolutely
school in all of this as well. So it will influence lots.
Sorry, you know, we have a character called Mike Mongo, who we all know too well, who ran our kids' space camps, and he's from America. And we had the coolest thing for me last year, and this is a true story, is I, the chief executive of the space agency, with the head of MOD Space here in our offices on Unst. And it was a beautiful sunny day, and thanks to space, we've got a high-speed fiber optic cable all the way up to Unst. 2 years ago, getting a signal was like divining for water. I couldn't have spoken to you. Now we've got this signal. And Mike came out and he showed me in his iPad. The iPad was in 4 quadrants. On the top left hand was a lady astronaut, female astronaut from the Kennedy Space Centre. On the right hand top quadrant were the astronauts in the ISS, and in the bottom 2 were 2 schools from Shetland, and the kids were asking the astronauts what they were having for lunch that day. Now how cool is that? Is that not what it's all about?
It is inspiring people, absolutely. Or Torsten, you've given me a signal that there are maybe some other questions. Do you want to come in? Chiara, come in and ask the questions, because some of them are alert to me without my spec.
I know that Frank is on a short run now, but I would like to ask or bring in 2 questions. One is from Eileen Hamilton. Do you have a concern about the talent pipeline available for you now and in the future?
No, none whatsoever. Going back, so people ask me, what are jobs in space? A job in space could be a security guard at the front gate, a cleaner. I use this, there's all sorts of different ways to look at it. What I get emails and CVs via LinkedIn every week from young people, and I've got to say a lot of young ladies asking me if we've got jobs, and their backgrounds are in everything from maths graduates to science graduates to history graduates. There's a lot of interest in the sector, and I think there's more interest than there are jobs, and it's out. So they just need to find a way into the industry. So I have no concerns at all, because I see what's coming up on my emails. I think we as an industry need to go out and wave the flag a bit more about how people can find a job. And just to put this into context, just yesterday I got an email from a guy called Harry Jones from Bristol, who's studying physics, and he's in his final year, and he's begged me for a job. He said, I'll pour concrete, I'll cut grass, I want to come up here and be close to the Space Centre. So, and again, put Brexit to one side, there's a lot of talent out there around, throughout Europe, that will find its way here. I'm not concerned. I'm amazed at the enthusiasm that's out there. I didn't realise there was so much.
Mm-hmm.
You can't go wrong talking about space or dinosaurs. So
no. Somebody else said that to me last September, actually, the astronomer.
I have one final question from Kevin Scallion. You mentioned about the importance of undertaking market research into demand for a spaceport, which is so important. Do you have any tips for young space companies as to how to conduct market research in order to understand this potential demand?
That's a very Scottish enterprise question, Kevin. I didn't realise you were listening. Market research. You're asking the wrong person, as you probably know. The only thing you can do, if you're starting a business, you come up with an idea, and then you've got to put the spade work in, and you go and knock on the doors. You can find consultants that will tell you whatever you want to pay them to tell you. And if you look at all the various reports, talking about how many satellites are going to be launched, there's just over 4,500 at the moment up there. Depending on who you listen to, it could be in the next 10 years, 40,000 to 120,000 satellites. So it depends where you go. My tip to any young business person is take your idea, go and knock on the doors and find out for yourself. Go and talk to the companies. Go and talk to the Rocket Park Augsburgs, the High Impulses, the Arianes. Just cold call them and go and see them. And they'll, within bounds of reason, they'll tell you where they're heading. I don't think there's a set. Market research, has its place. Don't get me wrong. I'm being a bit tongue in cheek, but I think the only way to do it is through the soles of your feet. And Kevin's a big supporter of us too, by the way, and he's been here. Although I think when he came, you couldn't see very much. The sun wasn't shining.
For everyone else, Kevin Scallion he's the head of the space domain for the Scottish Economic Development Agency, international part, the Scottish Development International, and he supports our industry and champions it with all his might. We're very grateful to have him.
And a wedding singer as well. But he's been a great supporter, I've got to say. Hopefully the message I'm giving you is enthusiasm. It's about, but you got to remember, if you've been talking to me 3 years ago, I wouldn't perhaps been quite so bright. It takes time, Angela, to get to where we are. But there's what I will say for all the spaceports, and no one's asked me, what are the risks? For me, the risk is that we're too slow. The industry is moving at such a fast pace. These young people that I'm talking about, people that Kevin there just mentioned, They're in a hurry. They don't want to stop. They've got no fear. And technology is developing and changing so fast, that we as a country, both Scotland and the UK, need to be able to react to what the industry is looking for. And the problem with what we call old space, it's full of guys in blue suits and white shirts, who think in a different way. This industry is about the young companies, the young people, and we must adjust to that fleetness of foot. If not, going back to what Torsten was saying, we'll become a dinosaur and be left behind.
Mm-hmm. Well, Frank, I think the title was "Building a Spaceport is more difficult than building a rocket," which is your doppelganger into
Speech of X, actually, it wasn't me that said it. It was
exactly.
Rocket Lab.
That's right.
Yeah, and I believe him now. I mean, we're just before we close, because I've got to go and run and talk to the regulator. My day goes from dealing with people. We've got the farmers on site, but there's so many moving parts. You've got to get a planning permission. You've got to survive to work with the environmental, on the environmental side. Remember, we also need 4 licenses to launch from the UK. The Spaceport needs a license. We need a range license. The rocket or the launch provider needs a license, and then the satellite owner needs a license. So those license applications all need to be staffed and submitted. And at the same time, you've got to put together your standard operating procedures. How are we going to refuel the rocket? Where are we going to store the rocket? Where's the clean room going to go? So it really is, there are so many moving parts to the creation of the spaceport. But at the end of the day, you've got a spaceport here that's going to create 180 jobs on the island alone, never mind anything else.
So I think everybody, we'll have to bring the questions and we'll have to let Frank go, because otherwise,
we won't get my license from the regulator.
We won't get the license from the regulator, and you'll be. But it's brilliant to see you on such an upbeat, Frank, and to be sharing. You hide the tough bits, but you have burst through so many walls in the time that, certainly since that first meeting. I mean, the first I ever met was, I'm a global Scot also, and I was at a meeting in London, a meeting in Edinburgh, and somebody said, because I'd mentioned that we had contacts with the European Space Agency, space industry in particular, Ariane, and he said, "Oh, you might want to talk to. There's a crazy guy called Frank Strang up in Shetland. He's trying to get a spaceport out."
And that put the fuel in our tank. And going back, to without Ariane, giving us the belief, we wouldn't. It just gave us that belief. Going back to what Kevin's talking about with these young people. You need somebody to give you that belief and that support, and then that allows you to go forward. And I'm not saying it because I'm talking to you on this. That changed our plan of attack, and without you coming and Ariane coming, I don't think we'd be here now, to be honest.
Oh, well, thank you for that. So I think thereafter there was a lot of blood, sweat, tears.
Oh yeah, there was.
And you're here, so we're really privileged to have you. And thank you for taking. I know your diary is manic.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go.
All right, off you go then, Frank. Take care.
Thanks, everybody. Cheers, everybody.
Bye. One last thing, if I may, just before, I know Frank has left us now, Torsten, but I've been asked by Space Scotland. There's a job advert if everybody wants to get involved in the Scottish space industry. The executive director role for Space Scotland is advertised on the scottishspace.org website. And there are other jobs to be allocated. So if you want to get involved, move to Scotland and enjoy all of this. We are our new Scottish space organisation is hiring. The Scottish government has funded some positions for us, allow us to do that, which is brilliant.
Are Germans welcomed?
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yes.
Yes, especially those that are also global Scots.
Yeah, over to you.
Yes, it was a really, really interesting conversation, and many thanks. He's already left, but it was really great. So before we leave you for today, we have some great upcoming events that I'd like to tell you a bit about. So tomorrow at 6 p.m. Central European Summertime, we actually have our next Space Café Canada by Dr. Jessica West, who will be speaking with Maritime Launch Services about launching in Canada, to stick to the theme. Then in the next week, on the 2nd of May, we're kicking it off with our Space Café Austria by the wonderful Judith Delaney, who will be speaking with Thomas Rosenski of SB. And then on the 3rd of May, we'll have our 33 minutes with Dr. Jana Robinson of PSSI about the upcoming conference in Prague. Then on the 10th of May, we'll have our 33 minutes with Nicole Thalhofer of the BDLI. And on the 11th of May, there'll be the Young Global Talents hosted by me about the big important topic of space debris. And on the 12th of May, we'll have our Space Café Germany by the wonderful Andreas Schäfer, who will be talking with Dr. Holger Krag of ESA, which will be in German. All events are going to be online on Eventbrite. And as always, we love to hear your feedback, so please check in with us on Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Don't forget to sign up for our daily and biweekly newsletters. And if you want to treat yourselves to something special, become a Space Watcher today or help us out in the supporter program. Thank you all so much for your interest today, for asking all these great questions, and for being so active in the chat. And of course, a huge thank you to Angela and Frank for the inspiring talk and for being our guests. And thanks to the entire team behind the scenes for doing that great job week in and week out. And a huge thank you as well to ESA Space Solutions for their great support. I hope that you all stay safe and stay healthy. Thank you for joining us. I hope to see you in the next weeks and even tomorrow. And in the meantime, visit our website, follow us on social media, and don't forget, become a Space Watcher. Thank you.
Launcher.
Bye.